So let's talk about some specifics. This is globally. In this world, we have about a little under 8 billion people, and more than half of them, almost 60%, 4.6 billion people are active on social media. Think about that. 4.6 billion people are active. Now we have Mexico. So these next slides are just specific about Mexico and social media use. So you've got over 100 million social media users in Mexico. They're increasing by about 2.5 million people per year, adding to social media. And as a percentage of population, it's almost 80% of the population is active on social media. And it's over 100% of internet use. That means people are doubling up. So it's obviously very, very effective and growing very fast in Mexico. Again, to emphasize, the growth of social media, 2.5% versus the growth in population. So it's double. The social media is growing at double the rate of the population growth in Mexico. So the main channels, and really just to show that the primary source of information, when you polled internet users, the primary source of where are they getting? So if you're online, if you're digital and you're online, where are you getting your information from? Well, they're getting it from over 63% are getting it from social media, even more than search engines. So people in Mexico are using these channels, and it's growing to get their information, sources of information, and researching brands, which again come back to the financial aspect. You want your information out there. You want to sell your brand. You want to sell your company. You've got to use social media. Again, this is about, I'm going to skip around. This is about financial services. 26, almost 27% of the population, internet users, are using, internet banking. That's again a high number, and it's growing. Mexico's been behind, I guess, in Latin America, but it's growing very, very fast. So time spent. This is important, only to show that when we look at time spent on social media, it's decreasing, but it's only decreasing because TikTok is taking the users. So TikTok is exploding with the younger generation, and I can tell you, because we've spoken to a lot of them in Mexico, they are trading, they are active, they're interested in finance, they're active in finance, just like youth and millennials around the world. There's more women on TikTok than there is men, and women are becoming more interested in their financial future. So if you want to attack that segment of the populace in Mexico, you should think about TikTok. And TikTok is not what it's perceived to be, and we'll go through that. Okay, and then the biggest thing, and I guess this wasn't a surprise, because through the years we've known that Mexico, in terms of watching television, it's one of the top 3 societies in the world where people are watching a lot of television. So it's no surprise that and this is one of the highest in the world, that of internet users, they're watching any kind of video more than anything else. What does that say? That says if you are if you are investor relations, and you are not using video as part of your corporate access or strategy, even if you're not doing social media, you're making a big mistake, because that's where, again, the interests are. And if you decide to do a social media strategy, you have to use video. Okay, I'm just going to go through quickly through some of this. So this is Twitter. About 14% of internet users on Twitter is not that effective in Mexico. So again, when Jason comes on, he'll discuss this, but with a social media strategy, you have to look at all the channels and pick the ones that are useful, but obviously emphasize the ones that are most useful to you. Again, here's LinkedIn, another business focus. About 17% of internet users on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn, let's say, you'll see, isn't effective as some of the others. Here's Instagram. Now you're seeing some good numbers. 40% of the internet population has Instagram accounts, is active on Instagram. And then we come to the big numbers. TikTok growing very fast, almost 50%, but the king in Mexico is YouTube. where you have almost 80 million people. That's 80% or more than 80% of your digital users are on active on YouTube. So again, if video is not part of your investor relations strategy, especially when it comes to local investors, you're making a big mistake here. And then the most important thing is you have to develop a social media strategy. I think Jason will talk about that when he comes on. But you want to increase your company's awareness. You want to update investors between financial results. There's a lot of things that to look at, but I think having a strategy of social media really makes a lot of sense. And this is just some examples of clients of ours who use social media. Using LinkedIn for videos, and the most popular video are the earnings videos right after your earnings. A short, 3-4 minute video on the overview earnings gets a lot of views, and it's a very effective tool. And then Twitter, right? So certain markets, Twitter strong, so companies can use Twitter in between earnings to sort of make announcements. Any press release or non-press release could be essentially a tweet. So here's a bunch of companies that are using Twitter pretty effectively. And again, just some final thoughts. Social media is inexpensive versus traditional news media strategies. The most important thing, and again, Jason will go into, is you can measure return on investment. And this is very important, because I think if I asked everyone to tell me what the brokers and the PR newswires who you're paying a lot of money to and you're spending a lot of time with, are you getting a return on investment? You'll tell me you don't know, because the brokers will never give you the statistics, analytics on research reports, and certainly the PR newswires will never give that information as well. So, and then obviously everyone knows that IR website traffic is, let's just say it's minimal, but with social media you can generate driving, website integration and drive traffic to your website and reinvigorate your website. I just mentioned on Bronze, so we operate a very specific social community of investors and companies. We publish all the content, not just some of the content. All the content from your companies go onto our website. I mean, to our social app, we're trying to basically engage all investors and give you a high return on investment, which you don't get with traditional stuff. So, again, we try to solve problems like helping you target new investors, making sure that all your data is getting to investors, making sure that institutional investors can do direct outreach through our unique feature, which is the direct message system. So we try to solve using our platform. And again, this is just to emphasize that with all these media outlets, other than your corporate website, we're the only other platform that will publish all the data that's coming out. So now I'm going to ask Jason to come on. Jason, just click come on to the stage. While Jason's doing that, I'll introduce Jason. Jason is a vice president and head of investor relations for Sprout Social. I think I'll let Jason explain who Sprout Social is, but importantly, Jason has interesting insights because he was a buy side analyst on the buy side and also on the sell side. So he can really give some insights on how effective or ineffective the sell side is when discussing. Jason, the floor is yours. I would just give a brief introduction and talk a little bit about Sprout Social, and then obviously.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, and thanks everybody for having me here to talk for a few minutes. Tom, I will share my screen here. So,
great. So I'm going to stop sharing mine. Okay, go ahead.
Perfect. There we go. Let's just pull it up here. There we go.
Okay, and while Jason's sharing your screen, just mention if you want to ask a question on the top right-hand corner, you can show the chat or send a direct message to Jason or I. But okay, so Jason, perfect. Go right ahead.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. So as Tom said, my name is Jason Reckel. My pronouns are he and him, and I am the head of investor relations and corporate development for Sprout Social. I am in somewhat of a unique position and have something of a unique perspective on this topic and subject. given that I am the head of IR and given the company that I manage investor relations for. So I'll first talk a little bit about Sprout Social, and I think that will potentially help give context to the conversation today. But before I joined Sprout, I spent, as Tom said, roughly 12 years working on Wall Street. The first couple of years on the sell side doing equity research, and then 7 years on the buy side as a tech analyst. And so I've seen kind of all sides of the business. And a couple of years ago, right around the time of Sprout's IPO, got to know the management team, got to know the opportunity a little bit, and the pieces kind of came in place for the opportunity to do something really cool together. And so Sprout is a social media management company. We have 32,000 plus customers today. We're B2B software, and what we do is help brands manage their social media presence. Right. And so there are, I think Tom did a great job of laying out the market and why, investor relations professionals need to be on social. But, the reality is that companies need to be on social now as well. Right. And every consumer on the planet is on social. And so we feel that companies need to have a proactive publishing, engagement, analytics strategy, and or social listening strategy wrapped into that to help meet their customers on social where they are. And so our software is a unified platform that helps brands, 32,000 of them, execute their social media strategy on a daily basis. And for me, when I joined Sprout, it was interesting because I had never done IR. I had never been on social as a professional, and pretty quickly realized that whether my investors were talking to me or not, whether it was a big investor or a small investor, institutional or retail, it didn't matter. They were on social and they were getting information about my company from social, whether that was our quarterly earnings information, whether that was information that my competitors are tweeting about, whether it was information that my customers were tweeting about and their interactions with us as a company, as a brand, as an employer brand. There's so much information on social that my investors now have access to, and they were tapping into it. And so I realized that as an IRO at Sprout, we of course have social handles. We have a really sophisticated social media strategy as a company, but as the IR leader for Sprout, I needed to meet my investors on social. And what that has meant has been rethinking how we distribute content, rethinking the cadence of, or the calendar of how we want to publish and distribute that content on social. And what that allows us to do is really consistently publish highlights from our quarterly reports, publish highlights and information from partner updates and customer updates and new product updates, understanding that investors are going to see that, right? And investors are increasingly leveraging that content as a baseline of information for them to make investment decisions. And so I put up here, just as an example, the Sprout Twitter account. And as I said, very early on, we actually didn't have a social account. You can see here, Sprout Social Investor Relations joined in August of 2021. And we're a social media management company. We are presumably one of the best in the world at in terms of social sophistication. And my IR team is brand new at this, right? Which tells you that this is kind of directionally, I believe, where the market is going, where investor relations professionals need to go. And what we decided to do in August of last year, and what we've really started to execute now over the last 8-9 months, is publishing content. So we build a content calendar, we publish it on Twitter, we publish it on LinkedIn. We understand that Twitter is kind of the information source that then is populated out to many other media outlets, many other social outlets. And so Twitter is the place to start from a publishing perspective. And, I'll scroll down here. It's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, we publish highlights from our calls, highlight a few quotes, highlight a few comments from my CEO. And investors see these things and use it to inform how they make decisions. And so one of the things I think that's important here, there definitely is confusion within the investor relations community about, well, is this something that I'm allowed to do? Will my general counsel allow me to publish information on social media? We, prior to launching our social profiles as an IR team, we did a ton of work on the market. We aligned with outside counsel. I've aligned with my internal legal team and my general counsel. And basically we create content in advance inside of a social media management platform. It could be Sprout, it could be, there are others on the market as well, but we create content inside of that platform, and that allows me to review it. It allows my PR team to review it, and allows my general counsel to review it. And so we can align before anything goes out on social. We can align on what we're going to say and when we're going to say it. And that's incredibly important, as we all know, to executing our role here. So this is one element of it. And then I wanted to share as well on LinkedIn. It's really typical, that after we announce anything or have a news release, in this case, our Q1 results, that I and many other people across our company are sharing those highlights with their professional networks on LinkedIn. My professional network happens to be our investors, many of them, our bankers, our analysts, but the rest of our employee population represents our employer brand, right? Our customers are reading and seeing these highlights, our partners, our potential future employees. And so you're building groundswell around, the employer brand, the investment brand of your company with the people who have an affiliation to it. And it doesn't just have to come to me. I put this on here because this was my LinkedIn post from our Q1 results. And you can see here, I got roughly 6,000 impressions from this post on LinkedIn, which just speaks to, and this cost no money, right? It was from my personal account on LinkedIn, speaks to the reach and the cost effectiveness of using social as a platform to communicate as an IRO. More sophisticated use case here is, so I use a technology called social listening to tap into all of the things that are being said about my investment, hashtag SPT, on social, right? So the utilization of social as an IRO, I don't believe should be just about publishing content or just about putting information in front of investors. It's equally important that we're using social to harness it for what it is, which is an incredible information source, right? So my investors are talking about Sprout on social. Retail shareholders are talking about Sprout on social. They're talking about my competitors. They're talking about my management team. And using a technology like social listening allows me to tap into all of that and understand exactly what's being said, when it's being said, how is that trending, what is the sentiment about my stock and my stock price brand on social. All of these things are incredibly easy to tap into and really insightful, because I can take the conclusions, the data and information from a report like this, which I'm accessing in real time, to then use it to inform how I communicate with investors, the types of things I want to talk with them about, the types of things I want to talk about on a quarterly earnings call. Maybe I want my CEO to get in front of an issue, right? It's kind of an open-ended use case. And so this is just an example. I've run a listening report here in real time for year to date on my company. You can see there are 50,000 plus total volume of conversations about, again, this isn't about the company, this is about the stock, hashtag SPT. So 50,000 volume, or 50,000 number of conversations about my stock on social just this year alone. 20 million impressions of my stock on social this year alone. And as I scroll through here, like this is the timeline of topic volume. And so I can see how has the direction of conversation about Sprout been over the course of time. And what's really interesting here, if you didn't know why there might be spikes in volumes or dips and valleys in volume, you definitely want to dig in and learn here. I've already done that, but in this case, like in March of 2022, We announced a massive global partnership with Salesforce. It went out, to hundreds of thousands of Salesforce's customers, all of our customers. The reach of that product integration and partnership was incredible. And so I know that there was a huge volume of conversation about Sprout and Salesforce around March of this year, which is what you see here. But what's really interesting is that I then use engagement to help understand how people are thinking about my stock. I use a sentiment summary to understand when people are talking about my stock. Is it in a positive light? Is it in a negative light? Has that changed over time? And again, that influences the way that I communicate our positioning, the way that I communicate our performance, because I already know in advance of that communication what my investors are saying and what they're thinking about my company. And so as you can see, then there's a network overview here. And this is just where those conversations are happening. This is specific to Sprout, but for all of you and your companies, it's going to be different depending on your own social strategy, depending on where your customers or your investors are choosing to go to talk about your company, about your stock. And so all just, tools that we can use, and all getting back to, I think, Tom's initial point, which is that investors are on social, and particularly as the younger demographic matures and transfers wealth and becomes more active in terms of owning and trading individual securities, it just becomes more important to meet that younger demographic where they are. And as Tom laid out so well, that younger demographic is on social. They're gathering their information on social. So I think it's a huge opportunity for you to amplify the work of the company, amplify the work of the IRO role by leveraging the opportunity to be on social. I know I just threw a lot in there, and so Tom and group, I'll maybe pause there, and happy to have a conversation or take questions.
Yeah, you got some questions here that came in. So, okay, so this one says, social media is great. I'm concerned that we may have to hire more people to organize and manage social media channels. Can you talk about, obviously you came from the buy side and you got into this company, but you probably hear this, like, so, if someone's going to take on this, this social media, these social media platforms, I mean, is it a lot of work? Do you have to hire more people? How many people on your staff? Can you give us an idea?
Yeah. So I think it depends on what you're willing to take on and what your current team is willing to take on. From our perspective, we launched a social strategy in August of 2021. We didn't hire anyone new. Really, in order to execute that strategy, I aligned with my PR team and my legal team. The three of us did a ton of work to understand what would it take to execute a social strategy. And then we use our own software, not trying to pitch Sprout Social by any means, but our software, our cheapest plan is $99 per month. There are other social media management plans out there in the market that can accomplish similar goals, but you're not talking about a meaningful price point in terms of your overall IR budget. And as I just kind of showed, the impact has the opportunity to be enormous. And so really it's just about aligning on what that initial strategy looks like, and that's time and personnel input from different stakeholders across the team. And then it should be pretty straightforward and pretty cost effective in order to execute.
Great. Another question is, how do you measure the effectiveness of social versus traditional, broker corporate access, attending conferences, et cetera? So I guess that's straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I try not to measure specific engagements. The thing that I care about and the barometer that my management team measures me on is relative valuation, right? There are 50 different SaaS companies of similar scale and size as Sprout, with similar growth and margin dynamics. That each one has its own differences. But how is Sprout valued relative to that peer group? And the input into that value, of course, is our execution as a business, But a huge input into that relative valuation is our messaging to investors, our level of engagement with investors at conferences, our level of engagement with the sell side, and increasingly importantly, how we've democratized access to information about the company and how we've shared our corporate message, our corporate performance on social. And it's hard to segment those things out, right? Because like I had a few investor meetings this morning, and in one of them, a person referenced a tweet from my competitor. And thankfully, like I had seen the tweet, I was aware of it. And so I was ahead of the question, but what if I hadn't been, right? And we've had instances where a retail shareholder published an analysis on Reddit about our own customer acquisition trends. And it moved the stock that day more than any sell-side research report ever had. And so had I not known to look for that thread on Reddit, I would have missed it. And as we went into our next quarterly report, I knew that it was going to be top of mind for people. I knew that investors would have seen it. And so I needed to speak to it. And so all of these things are intertwined. And I think ultimately all of them just get to engagement. And for me, that's measured by relative valuation.
Great. And then final last question before we is, do you post broker research on your social media? Are you allowed to, or have you done that?
I don't. Honest answer, I don't know if that's allowed. We don't. I mean, the voice of our social channel is organic to us. We want it to be our voice and not the voice of brokers, not the opinions of others. We want it to be fact-based about our performance, fact-based about our competitors, fact-based about, the things that we're doing as a company. And so that's been our focus.